So good evening, everybody. This is the Oakdale City Council regular meeting for June 14th, 2022. Katie, would you do the roll call, please?
Councilmember Ingwertsen.
Here.
Councilmember Olson.
Here.
Councilmember Swedberg.
Here.
Councilmember Zabel.
Here.
Mayor Ranke.
Here. Please join me now in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So for the approval of the agenda, there are a number of things that have been modified since the first one came out. City Administrator Volker, can you walk us through that?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council. So an amended agenda went up yesterday that had some clarification on the public hearing. The motion was added. There's a second public hearing added. And then some clarification on a couple things. That was all yesterday, so that's been up and posted. Today, I'd ask for a consideration for 3 amendments to the agenda. One is I'd like to pull consensus C. We are no longer proposing that hire on a consensus C, so I'd like to have that pulled from the agenda. The second thing is for the Helmo Impact Apartment, Resolution 2022-02-67 is in front of you. There is a change on number 4, condition, and that was handed out to you just now. And if that's approved, we'll get it uploaded to the website, and that can be discussed during that agenda item. The third thing can also be discussed during the agenda item is for the Willowbrook item towards the end of the agenda, the Willowbrook 6th edition on Resolution 2022-70. There's an added condition number 3, and that is in front of you as well. And that can be discussed at that time as well as an alternative resolution. So I'd ask for those 3 adjustments to the agenda, so for the amended agenda.
Thank you. Any questions for Chris? Could I have a motion then, please?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the agenda has been approved, amended as approved. Next up is approval of minutes, and there's 2 sets, the workshop, Oakdale City Council workshop, May 24th, and the Oakdale City Council regular meeting, May 24th. Starting with the workshop, upon review, councilors, were there any changes that you wanted to comment on or clarifications? Could I have a motion then, please?
So moved.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those meeting minutes are approved as presented. Second set deals with the regular meeting, the Oakdale City Council, May 24. Upon review, any clarifications or discussions? Could I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Can I have a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Then those meeting minutes are approved also. Thank you. Next up on the agenda is time for our public hearing. And we have a public hearing for the 40th Street Reconstruction first. Brian Bachmeyer, consulting city engineer, is going to take us through this.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. We are conducting the public improvement hearing for the 40th Street reconstruction improvements. I have a quick PowerPoint that I can go through. And this is for 40th Street east of 694 to Ideal Avenue. This is the alignment that we're looking at. On the left side is 694, and then on the right side is Ideal Avenue. This is just kind of an aerial photograph, and you can kind of see the excuse me. They had it initially.
Yeah.
Second here. We have a new team tonight in the audio
Yeah.
room.
Just one moment, the computer just is restarting.
Okay.
I think while we're waiting for the public improvement hearing presentation, I'll just kind of review that we did publish notice in the local paper and sent notices to the 3 benefiting property owners associated with the project. The funding sources are identified. It's a combination of special assessments and city participation in the project. The city share of the project did not change. It was capped by the master funding agreement for Willowbrook, so the additional costs are part of the assessment. Getting back to the presentation, you can see the alignment that they've started to carve out just to the south, the curvilinear alignment. The straight line east and west, that is the existing 40th Street that has been vacated. The improvement hearing is really to talk about why, what, and when, to describe the improvements, an opportunity to hear any testimony from the public and the benefiting property owners, and also for the council to deliberate, discuss the improvements, and determine if they want to order the project. This project was initiated by a petition from the developer on March 8th, so it doesn't require a 4/5 majority, just a simple majority for the council to approve. The objectives of the improvement really are to provide for the new alignment. It's to reduce the intersections on Ideal Avenue. Currently, there's T intersections at 40th and Ideal, and then Lake Jane Trail in Lake Elmo. So by changing the alignment, we can line up these 2 intersections and reduce one of the intersections. It's also a curvilinear alignment that controls speeds. It's a more contemporary, more modern type of platting than the straight street. And it's also consistent with the goals of the small area plan and the comprehensive plan that was developed for the Willowbrook area. The improvements themselves really convert a rural road section to an urban section by removing the ditches, installing curb and gutter and storm sewer, and then also improving the water quality by treating the water at sedimentation basins that are being developed as part of Willowbrook. This is just a general overview, conceptual plan. The one thing I wanted to note is you can see the sidewalks and trails that are along 40th Street. And if I could start from the right and go to the left, right off of Ideal Avenue, the 8-foot wide bituminous path is on the south side. That runs all the way to the roundabout, and then it crosses over and goes along the north side to the west, excuse me. And the reason for that was to tie the 2 park areas together. You have the centerpiece park on the south side and then the other park that's on the north side. So the wider trail is to provide a connection between those 2 open space park areas. The sidewalk, again, starting on Ideal Avenue, is 5 feet wide, is on the north side of the roadway, and then at the roundabout, it crosses over and goes on the south side from there to the west.
Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question about that while we're going?
Councilmember Zabel.
Brian, so you said the sidewalk is on the north side of 40th Street on the western half of that, correct?
Correct.
So my question is,
Excuse me, it's on the south half. On the west of the roundabout, the sidewalk? The sidewalk is on the north side. I wonder if I can, okay, so it's on the north side, and then it crosses over, and then it's on the south side.
okay, sorry, I misunderstood.
And then the path is on the south side, crosses over, and is on the
Okay,
north side.
sorry, I misunderstood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The developer is preparing the alignment by grading it currently. They're removing the existing roadway. They're also installing water and sewer mains that will be under the new roadway alignment. The city project will start in July. It should be substantially completed by winter with all the paving work so that we will be able to open the roadway. There will be some final cleanup items in the spring of the year. For example, there's a long lead time on streetlight fixtures, so there's a chance that may continue into the spring of 2023, and then if there's any final boulevard cleanup. But the balance of the improvement should be completed this fall, right before winter. These plans were included in the feasibility study, and You can see this is kind of starting on the west side going to the east. And you can see, again, the sidewalk and the trail along the alignment. There is the roundabout. And then there is the entrance into that park area on the south side there to the bottom. And then it continues and ties in with Ideal Avenue. The three properties that were reflected in the master agreement to be assessed are Outlot E, F, and G. So these three properties are the benefiting properties that are going to be assessed the improvements. This is an opportunity to hear any testimony from the benefiting properties or the public, then for the council to deliberate on the project, and then the council to decide to order the project, and it just requires a simple majority. With that, I stand for any questions the council may have.
Thank you, Brian. Councilors? Mine is one question dealing with just cost.
Yes.
So the increased cost above the engineer's estimate was about 35% with bid openings.
Yes.
The 5 people that put the bids together were, pretty tight.
Yes.
So nobody was an outlier that I saw. And then I'm appreciative of the ability to try to control that by reducing that 35% project cost down to 30 for this activity, because you've already priced out and contracted. The thought then is going forward on construction increases, is there techniques that can be done to control the additional construction cost increases through an aggressive approach of contracting or getting things tied up so that we aren't exposed, or the assessed parties aren't exposed to additional cost increases?
My comment to that would be that the engineer is very conservative in their quantities. So all items that are part of the bid should come in at or under the quantity that's reflected in the bid. If there are any other improvements that are not included in the project, we will have to come back to you for a change order request, and we can certainly discuss options and what can be done to address any unforeseen improvements that need to be added to the project.
So it sounds like then for the bulk of or for the project as contemplated, it's priced out, it's contracted, and there's not an exposure of additional costs.
Correct.
Thank you.
Correct. That we actually have another item on the bid agenda to talk about the award, so we can certainly expand upon that discussion.
Okay, good. Councilors, anything else? So then, as part of the public hearing, I'm going to open it up to the public. And the process that we'll do is that anybody that's interested in commenting about this project, please come to the podium, state your name and address, and then share your thoughts and or questions. We'll go through until there's nobody else that wants to speak. We'll close that portion of that public hearing, bring it back up front to the council for deliberation or additional questions, possibly from staff, and then we'll entertain a motion. So with that said, I'm going to open up to the public for anybody that wants to comment or question anything on this city project. Is there anybody that would like to comment? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it up to the council. Councilors, questions, additional thoughts, or any comments? Then I'll entertain a motion.
I'll waive the reading and adopt Resolution 2022-69, ordering Project R2022-02, 40th Street North Reconstruction.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Then the motion passes as presented. Thank you. The next public hearing tonight was for the Forefront Comprehensive Plan Amendment. And Andy, you're going to take us through this? Andy Gitzlaw, Community Development Director.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I will walk through this item tonight. It is for a PUD ordinance amendment and comp plan amendment to allow commercial uses on the 8.4 acre, what is also known as Parcel C, on the south frontage of the Forefront campus. This item has been before Planning Commission, has also been before City Council in a workshop, and it has been one where it has evolved. as the process has gone through, as the city has learned more, and as the developer has learned more through the process, which is often the case in projects like this. The big change would be that the applicant submitted a revised memo earlier this month, no longer requesting that the designation be changed from business park to mixed use, but business park to commercial. So basically not including the residential component. I think the results of the sewer study, which our engineering department put together with the support of council, helped to identify some bigger infrastructure barriers that are going to be needed for adding residential that would limit its ability at this site, at least at this time. So the applicant is requesting commercial. That is really pretty similar to the business park designation. Actually, when we look at the Met Council review process, going to residential, it's the much longer process for Met Council full review. It's more of an administrative review on their end from going to commercial to business park. And from staff's perspective, we saw that as a similar change as well from business park to commercial as well, and did recommend that change be supported. A couple of the other changes since the last time you've seen this is in the actual PUD ordinance amendment. Besides removing the residential component, the staff and the applicant discussed adjusting the list of prohibited uses and modeled that after what was done for the Tartan Crossing PUD, and then a little bit of back and forth on there to get to that final list. The applicant is also here this evening and certainly could talk. And we did set this up as a public hearing to be held at council. And although there was one already held at Planning Commission, because of that change in designation, just to be safe, making sure that there's one additional opportunity in case anybody wanted to provide additional comment. Again, back to Planning Commission, they were supportive of the original request, and there was no public comment at the first hearing.
Okay. Thank you, Andy. Councilors, anything for Andy? Before I open it up for the public, I see Mr. Larson is in the audience. Do you or your colleagues want to make any comment about this? Very good. Councilors, anything for Mr. Larson? Okay, so as the public hearing portion of this again, I'm going to open it up to the audience for comment. If there's comments, please approach the podium, state your name and address, and then share your thoughts or your questions. Typically, it is about a 3-minute time limit, and then we'll close that portion, bring it back up to the council for deliberation, and I'll ask for a motion. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to comment on this activity or this project? Is there anybody that would like to comment on this project? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back up to the council. Councilors, any questions or comments?
I have a question, I guess, for
Councilmember
Andy.
Zabel.
Andy, on the prohibited uses, what were the sticking points between the applicant and the city? I guess this is the first time we've seen the actual list of prohibited uses, so I'm curious what some of the differences between both sides may have been.
Yeah, I think the original list we had sent over was the one from Hy-Vee Isle, so it did have some more restrictions like grocery stores and things like that, and like the kiosk sales was one of those too. So it was a more broader list, and the applicant came back with a somewhat more pared back list, which we thought as staff was acceptable. Sometimes getting too prohibitive, that Hy-Vee one is an example at Tartan Crossing, is then the market and the world changes and all of a sudden delivery groceries is there. So trying to balance, making sure we're having uses that would be negative consequences, but also not being too restrictive that, PUD amendments have to keep coming back.
Okay, thank you.
Councilors, anything else? So then I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to waive the reading and adopt Resolution 2022-68, approving the Forefront Comprehensive Plan Amendment and PUD Ordinance Agreement.
So there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Then the motion passes as presented. Thank you. Thank you. Next on the agenda is open forum. Open forum is a time when anybody in the audience that wants to comment about anything that's going on in the city or their thoughts about it can do so, and just by approaching the podium, stating your name and your address, and then sharing your thoughts. It may not get into an interactive conversation, but we sure like to welcome anybody's comments. So is anybody here that'd like to make a comment about goings on in the city? Seeing none, I'm going to move on to the next item, which is the consensus motions. So we have on the agenda A through M, and earlier we heard that item C was going to be removed. So councilors, do you want to consider any other items to be removed?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to take off H.
H. Okay. Councilors, anything else? So then can I have a motion then please for A, B, D through G, and I through M?
Make a motion to approve consensus motions A, B, D through G, and I through M as presented.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and the second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Then those consensus motions as described are approved. Councilmember Zabel, item H.
Item H is a service agreement between the City of Oakdale and the Animal Humane Society. The reason I'm pulling this is because some of the language in the letter of understanding that City Administrator Volkers provided to us runs contrary to some of council's feelings regarding euthanasia of animals, as we've talked about previously in a workshop. In talking with City Administrator Volkers, it's staff's recommendation that we conditionally approve it tonight, with the conditions being that they go back to the Humane Society, remove that language, but then they can do that administratively versus waiting 2 weeks to come back to us. And so the language that I'm looking at removing, maybe it'll just be easier if I read the whole section as it currently sits in there, and then note what we would be striking out, if that's best for staff. Chris is shaking her head, perfect.
Yes.
So on page 1 of the letter of understanding, it's section 1, item D, and the section says euthanasia services as deemed necessary. Well, let me step back. The section says American Humane Society agrees to provide the following services. Item D is euthanasia services as deemed necessary by an AHS veterinarian. These services may be provided at the end of the legally required holding period or in the case of a medical situation that requires immediate euthanasia. And so the language that we'll be looking at striking out there is the section regarding euthanasia for animals at the end of the legally required holding period. We would keep the language about being medically necessary, just removing the end of the holding period. And then item F, it currently says euthanasia services and body disposal as deemed appropriate by AHS veterinary staff. The animals will be evaluated for these services at the end of the legally required holding period. So obviously, since we removed that in D, that's no longer an option, so it's no longer applicable to item F, so we can strike that entirely. So my motion is going to be to approve consensus motion H as presented with the condition that the language be amended.
2 changes as you described.
That works. Yep.
Councilors, any questions about this amendment? And is it understandable? So there's a motion. Can I have a second, please?
Second.
There's a motion and the second. Is there any discussion? Maybe just one question. Chief Newton, any issues on the contract to allow this to move forward administratively as we've asked?
Context on this?
What I'm looking for is just ease of implementation, and then if you want to give some context too.
Yeah, well, we'll go back to the Animal Humane Society, see if it's possible to remove that language. But can't stress enough that this is our last resort, and we have companion animal control that we're also using. And since using them, they've already vetted 2 animals that did not go to the Humane Society. They were sent to rescue, and because those would have been candidates for euthanasia. So we are doing everything we can to ensure that that doesn't happen, but we will certainly visit this and see if it's possible to have that language changed as requested.
Very good. Counselors, good enough?
So I just want to be clear. If the language is not changed, staff does not sign this agreement. Chris, we were on the same page with
I'm
that?
clear.
Okay,
Yeah.
just want to make sure.
Understood.
Thank you. Counselors, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion as amended passes. Thank you. Next up on the agenda are the advisory boards and commissions. And again, for people who might be turning in for one of the first times or just aren't aware, each of our counselors and myself are liaisons with each of the commissions. So the first one is the Commission for the Economic Development Commission, and typically we have a little report about what's going on. The meeting that was scheduled for June 1st was canceled, and so we'll get a report from next meeting. The next commission is the Environmental Management Commission. There wasn't a meeting. The commission that we did that did meet was the Planning Commission. Councilmember Swedberg is the liaison. Colleen,
Yeah,
any comments?
Yeah, Aaron, what does she consider a contract? Consultant for Stanton?
Yeah, stand down.
Yeah. She gave a great presentation on the Planning Commission roles and responsibilities and expectations. Maybe we could do something like that for some of the other commissions. It would be, something helpful, because it was very good to hear from her side, and it was very clear what those roles are and our expectations from the Planning Commission. So that was the main thing.
Very good.
Okay?
Thank you. The next meeting was, or the commission is the Parks and Recreation Commission, and there was not a meeting. And the one that I get to be the liaison for is the Tree Board. There wasn't a meeting, but there is one coming up next week. And the types of things we're going to discuss would be just a debrief on the Arbor Day that was had and the distribution of trees, the 22 spring planning plan, planning for the 23 spring planting plan, and then there's a fall buckthorn removal event coming up this year, 22. So I'll be able to report on more stuff next meeting. Next up would be an award of a bid, and this is for a city project for 40th Street reconstruction. Mr. Bachmeyer, good evening again.
Yes, Mayor and Council, on June 6th, we did open bids for the project. There were 5 contractors that submitted bids. Northdale Construction was the low bid at $3,336,582.52. 5 contractors, so we have to believe it's a competitive bid. They were fairly tight when you take a look at the difference from the bottom to the top, $400,000. That's pretty tight on a $3 million, so less than 10%, or around 11%, I guess. The engineer's estimate for the project was $2,557,000, so it is 30% over the engineer's estimate. How does that impact the project financing? As I indicated earlier, this is funded with a combination of special assessments and GO bond participation with the city. The city's share was capped in the master development agreement, so that doesn't change. So the bid results do impact the assessments to the 3 properties that I noted earlier as well. I will say that the 2 property owners that are affected, one property owner owns 2 parcels, and then there's a second party that owns 1 parcel. They both did submit waivers of appeal, amended waivers of appeal based on these bid results. So they understand what the bid results were, and they waived their right to appeal those assessments. With that, I guess it's our recommendation at this point to award the contract. This allows the contractor to start construction in July and be completed by winter. With that, I'd stand for any questions the council may have.
Very good. Thank you, Brian. Counselor, is there anything for Mr. Bachmeyer? My one comment again is just the significance of the increase. You know, it is difficult for these projects anywhere in the city or in the Twin Cities to perform out well and to have the construction increases like we've experienced is a sign of the times, but it's also a major problem. So kudos to these two entities that are continuing to do the work, and also wish them much success. So could I have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to waive reading, adopt resolution number 2022-63, awarding city project R2022-02, the 40th Street North Reconstruction contract to Northdale Construction Company, Inc. in the amount of $3,336,582.52, subject to the benefiting property owners signing petition amendments agreeing to the revised assessment amounts.
So is the motion, is there a second?
Second.
Is the motion and the second? Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that motion passes as presented. Thank you.
Thank you. The next item I have listed is to approve the plans and specifications for the coating improvements on Water Tower 2, Standpipe 2. That is the water tower that is in Everly Park on the north end of our community. An inspection was done last year that indicated both the interior and exterior coatings need to be repaired. So we did go through a proposal process to select the consultant. They were returned. They have since prepared the plans and specifications for the project to move forward. So it's our recommendation to approve those plans and specs and authorize the advertisement and collection of bids.
Thank you, Brian. Councilors, any questions for Brian?
I have one.
Councilmember Zabel.
You know, to your last point, Mr. Mayor, about how costs, for capital projects, including this one, they go up, it seems like daily. They're going up through the roof. Brian, can you shed some light on this for me? This project was approved as part of our CIP project that we approved in December. Why are we waiting until mid-June to put this out for quotes? Why weren't we out sooner this spring asking for these bids?
Let me defer to Public Works Operations Manager Jim Romanek. He was able to talk to the consultant and find out why there was a slight delay in bringing the plans forward for council approval.
Good evening, Mr. Romanek.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I know the question was brought up to me today about why the delay, and so I reached out to the consultant that we're working with, Badger State Inspection. They work with a consulting engineering firm, WSB Engineering, and the engineer that is working on this project is out of the office this week, so I wasn't able to get a good reason why the plans were delayed, but the contractor basically said it was an engineering delay in drawing the plans up. The Badger State Inspection did the technical drawings for the project, but the engineering wasn't completed in a timely fashion, so.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
Any other questions?
Councilors?
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. So we have a project in front of us. Could I have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to waive reading, adopt resolution number 2022-64, approval of plans and specifications for city project U 2022-04, Water Tower 2 painting, and authorize the advertisement of bids.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes as presented. Thank you. Next up is community development, and we have a recycling grant. Good evening, Shannon. And welcome.
Thank you. So before talking a little bit about the projects that we have applied for as part of the 2022 recycling grant, I wanted to provide a little bit of context about the grant itself. Now, both the city and the county have a mutual goal of encouraging residential recycling and waste reduction. And since at least 2005, Oakdale has facilitated these activities with the help of the Washington County grant. So the total amount of the grant has stayed relatively consistent over the past few years and is dependent on a couple things, one being the number of households in the city, and the second being the number of projects applied for in each grant cycle. This year, we've applied for 4 different projects. All 4 of those were reviewed by the Environmental Management Commission in its April meeting. They're part of the EMC's 2022 work plan and are consistent with our comprehensive plan goals in the resiliency chapter. So the EMC did vote in that meeting to support all 4 of the proposed projects. And the breakdown of the grant funds for those 4 projects are along 3 generalized lines. The first one is capital cost and consultative costs. So in the memo that was provided for you, you'll see Project 3, for example, calls for purchasing waste bins that provide for recycling in front of the nature center. So quite a bit of the grant funds will go towards purchasing those bins and installing them. There's a project as well to potentially provide opportunities for organic waste recycling at the farmers market. Again, grant funds will be used for capital costs to provide for those bins. So capital costs would be about 35% of the grant funds itself, or about $18,000. That's what we've projected so far. The second line here is going to be costs for marketing. So that'll be covering education materials, printing, stamps, postage, if we create any videos, if we have any promotional content itself pushed on social media, then grant funds would be going towards that purpose. That will cover a lot of the educational proposed projects we have for projects number 2 and 4 here in your memo. So that will be about 15% of the grant, or about $8,000. And that last stream of funding is going to be mostly for administrative costs. So that's covering salaries for primarily myself, but other individuals and staff, just to give their time, effort, and energy towards these particular projects. So staff is recommending that the council execute the grant for 2022. Again, this is a grant that we've had year over year for at least 16 years. So it's a pretty good way for us to promote some of the goals we have in our comprehensive plan.
Very good, Shannon. Thank you. Councilors, anything for Shannon?
I have one. Shannon, does
Members
this
Abel.
grant require any cost sharing from the city?
No.
Perfect. It's the best kind of grant.
Councilors, is there anything else? Could I have a motion then, please?
I'll make motion to waive reading and adopt resolution number 2022-65, accepting grant funds in the amount of $52,608 from Washington County to the city of Oakdale, and authorize the city administrator to execute the 2022 Washington County Recycling Grant Agreement.
So there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second?
There's a motion on the second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Then the motion passes as presented. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon. Next up is going to be the Helmel Station final plat and impact apartments site plan amendment. Mr. Gitzloff, good evening again.
Yes, good to see you again, Mayor and Council. As stated, the item before is a final plat, impact apartments, and a site plan amendment. As you may recall, Impact Apartments is building the apartment building in the Helmel Station PUD directly across the street from the new Gold Line BRT station. They went through the process starting last December with concept plan review, planning commission, and ultimately city council approval back in March for the necessary land use applications to construct the building. Since then, a couple things have occurred. So they were approved for a 321 unit building, and that did require a deviation as part of PUD deviation as part of the site plan approval to exceed the density requirements. Since then, they've gone back to make a couple modifications to mostly to make the cash flow on the project work. Obviously, to obtain financing and with construction costs out there. They are back here today before going out for construction to increase by 7 units from 321 to 328 units. And the way they'd be doing that is basically by shifting some of the interior community space to additional apartment space. So the overall size scale of the building would not change. We asked them to rerun the traffic, or at least have the expert take a look at it to see if it'd be an impact, and roughly 1% to 2% with traffic changes. So nothing substantial to really change the findings. And that traffic study took into account both this development on the R5, a future development by no hard impact apartments in R6, and then the remaining balance of the development on the site. Two other things that they're requesting approval on. One would be another primarily for cost savings, as there was originally an underground tunnel between R5 and R6, complicated by a water line that also needs to go through that area. And the applicant is going to is pulling that tunnel request, and the site circulation between the two buildings would be on the street. And the third request is the parking area. I know this was a topic before about parking minimums and this district having a parking maximum, and the applicant wanting some flexibility to exceed that maximum, which was granted. A couple of things that have happened since then. The R6 Met Council's got a sewer project that is going to be occurring that's going to limit the ability to go as deep into that R6 parcel with parking. So they are requesting approximately reducing that by 30 stalls, which actually it brings them under the maximum, so that does not require a deviation approval. And we did ask the applicant to submit some more detail about how they're going to handle parking and parking management overall. And they did provide us with an exhibit that showed how they're going to portion that out between commercial and tenant space, knowing that the plan is a little different than what is before. So that's been reviewed by staff as well. So that's the site plan changes that are before you. The other application is final plat. Final plat is consistent with the preliminary plat, and yes, so the final plat's consistent. The conditions are all essentially the same ones as what were in the preliminary plat as well. And one thing I'll note too is that one of the conditions of preliminary plat, which is also final plat, is the approval of that development agreement. So that's something we're actually working with the developer right now to finalize that agreement. That would be required for them to have that in place before they could start construction. I will make one more note, just jumping back to the amended site plan. And I didn't carry my copy of this, but there was one modified condition in that resolution that's in front of you here. You can take a peek at it again. Thank you. Which would be number 4. Previously, it said the developer must provide funding for necessary fire expenses to serve the 7-story building up to a maximum of $12,500. Based on some of the input from council members, knowing construction prices are going up, prices for everything, wanting to build in a little bit more flexibility for the city that, by the time the building gets under construction, we need these costs to not have a maximum. So the change here that would be requested would be changing this language to be the developer must provide funding for necessary fire expenses to serve the 7-story building, currently estimated at $12,500. If the total cost is greater than $12,500, city staff will provide additional documentation to the developer to substantiate the increase in cost. And about $9,000 of that is training, and about $3,500 is for just various equipment. So this isn't talking about going from equipment and training to like a fire truck or anything like that, but building in the flexibility. This is something new. The applicant is here, and we did let them know we'd be bringing this forward, but that's certainly something when you speak with the applicant, giving them the opportunity to address whether this condition would be acceptable or not. And that is all I have for the update. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Andy. Councilors, anything for Andy? So I see the applicant, and I recall you from the original presentation. I think the construction manager, director of construction. We are going to be taking the actions individually, the final plat and then the site plan. You're welcome to come up and comment a little bit on either one of those if you'd like to first.
Yeah, I can. So I'm Marie Dickover. I'm the construction manager for Norhart, address 6672 335th Street in Stacy.
Thank you.
I guess as the increase in units, I think you guys have stated a couple times, just construction costs are going up. So we're trying to increase the building value and increase financing. So I think that's pretty straightforward. And then like the increased cost in the fire, like fire training and fire equipment, like we're open to that. Like we want to make sure the city's covered. We do prefer like a cap, even if we were saying we're estimating now 12,000, we're going to double that and put it at 25,000 just to make sure that the city's covered. But like Andy had said, we want to, or having a list of this is what the expected costs are, so we kind of have something to fall back. I know the intention now is not to add a fire truck, but that has been conversations with other cities when we're putting a taller building than other things there. So I think that's all I really wanted to address.
Yeah, my sense about it, the way that you described it, Andy, was that you'd be open to listing the types of activities that would roll into that fire fee.
Yeah, Mayor Rankin, we've detailed the ones to date to the 12.5. So on this, I think our commitment would be working with the fire chief that if there's anything in addition to that that's needed, we would provide a itemized breakdown of that along with the rationale for why. We asked about going from 321 to 328, and does that trigger anything? And the fire chief said, well, no, because it's really the going up from really 5 to 6 to 7 stories, and that training and some of those components that's driving it, not necessarily the unit count.
My sense too is that you're going to find a sympathetic council for reasonable fees for this activity. Okay. So I'd like you to be, would you be okay working with staff to better define?
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
Yep, we're okay with that.
As long as you hear, councilors, anything?
Can I ask a question on that point? Maybe Andy, it's just clarification. So, so things like that training that's required to service a 7-story building, the applicant's going to be responsible for that cost forever, right? If we bring in new firefighters and that training is required, they'll be paying for that, right?
No. I know you didn't ask me.
Really, Andy? I mean, if it's
I'll defer,
if
but
it's
then
a
I've got a
specialized
comment on
training
it.
that's only applicable to this development, why wouldn't it? I guess that's my question.
I'll defer to Andy, then I'll comment too.
Council member, Mayor, I'll confirm, no, it's a one-time payment, but I will defer to our fire chief if he wants to provide some more detail on what would be used for.
Come on down.
Good evening, Chief.
Yeah, thank you,
So
Mayor.
Chief Wold, Fire Department Chief.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Council. So the training is a train-the-trainer application. So once we become trained in this train-to-trainer, we'll be able to train any additional staff that comes on.
Okay.
So that's why it's a one-time expense for our department to get trained, and then we will be able to train additional firefighters as they get hired in the future.
And then what about equipment?
Yeah, so the training, I think, is locked in at the amount that we proposed already. The equipment, the proposal was given earlier this year, so I could see some additional cost in that just due to inflation and the price of equipment. We could, rebid that and see what we come at. I don't think it'll be a huge increase, but it might be. But the majority of it, $9,000 of that 12.5 was the training, and we're locked in at the training. That's not going to go up. So it would just be some of the equipment needed to do it in the high-rise facility.
I'm sorry, I guess my question is, that equipment, is it only good for a few years? In a few years, we're gonna be looking at replacement costs and at the same time, is this equipment only applicable to the nature of this building being 7 stories? Like, are we only buying this or getting this equipment because of a 7-story building?
Yes, that's correct. Yep, the equipment needed is to do high-rise firefighting strategies and tactics, and the equipment needed to protect a 7-story building.
And that equipment, in theory, has a shelf life?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Councilors, anything else? So let's take this, the final plat item first. So can I have a motion to approve the final plat for the Helmo Station?
I'll make a motion to waive reading, adopt resolution number 2022-66, approving the final plat for Helmo Station, subject to conditions.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes as presented. The second one then would be a motion approving the amended site plan for the impact apartments, subject to conditions, including the added number 4 dealing with the necessary fire expenses. Could I have a motion, please?
Make a motion to waive the reading and adopt resolution 2022-67, approving the amended site plan for impact apartments, subject to conditions.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
I do. Well, I'd like us to have a conversation about that equipment expense. It's my belief that if there is a cost for equipment, a recurring cost, that it should be borne by the developer. I mean, it's only for their building. So I personally would like to see language in there saying that that is a cost that they have to be responsible for.
So how are you rationalizing the significant increase in value that the applicant is bringing to the community that will realize through our levy with that
Well,
request?
I mean, a 6-story building would have a value increase as well, and that cost wouldn't be, borne by our taxpayers. So the nature that, the reality that they want to make it a 7-story is fine, they can do that, but if there is an extraordinary cost associated with that, they should be responsible for that. In the same way that if a developer needs a new street, they're taking special assessments. They're responsible for that. It's just the nature of their decision as a developer.
Okay. I don't support that, but councilors, anybody else? So there's a motion, there's a second, there was some discussion, so I think we can move to the vote. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Then the motion passes as presented. Thank you. Andy, you going to take the last one to the Willowbrook?
Mayor, actually, I'm
No,
going to
Luke.
turn over to Luke McClanahan, but first wanted to, I know he's been in a few workshops, formally introduce him. He's really just jumped right in and been taking on a lot of applications, including the writing of the memos for these 2 previous items. But I want him to give him the opportunity to speak in front of council here today to the Willowbrook item, which he's now more well-versed than I am to speak about. Thank you.
And Luke, before you start, I just want to say thank you for coming tonight. It's a phenomenal project. We're excited as can be for you to begin and have a grand opening. So it's very cool. Thank you. Luke, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So this final plat is the Willowbrook 6th edition. The location it's at the southwest quadrant of 40th Street and Helmo Avenue. So this is a 62 single family lot subdivision along with 3 outlots. In staff's review of this final plat, it does conform to the approved detailed development plan and preliminary plat. Staff recommends approval of this final plat, and I should note that there was an additional condition added to the resolution that you should have in front of you. The condition came a little bit late after the packet went out last week, and I'll just read that verbatim. So the third condition there is the final plat must be revised as necessary to meet all requirements of the city attorney's plat opinion, and that the buyer/developer shall further adhere to all recommendations of the city attorney regarding title matters and recording instructions for instruments associated with the development. And with that, happy to answer any questions.
Very good. Thank you, Luke. Councilors, anything for Luke tonight?
Do you want to explain that number 3? He lost me. I mean, what's the gist of it? What's the...
Maybe I can.
Hop in,
Yeah.
Jim.
Jim, go ahead.
Mayor and Council, we've been doing recently plat opinions for the new developments in the city. It's common to do that because on these developments, they're conveying easements and you want to make sure that the developer has good title to the land that they're conveying. So that's the purpose for us doing plat
Okay.
opinions on this. It's something new we've recently initiated, but I think it's for the protection of the city. So that's what that means.
Thank you. Good, yep. My eyes glazed over on line 2, lost me. Yep,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Thank
Yeah,
you.
that makes, yeah.
Anything else, councilors? Could I have a motion, please?
I'll make a motion to adopt resolution number 2022-70, approving the final plat for Willowbrook 6th Edition located in the Willowbrook PUD with conditions outlined.
So there's a motion, is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Then that motion passes as presented. And thank you, Luke. Next on the agenda is time with our city attorney, Mr. Thompson. Good evening.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, nothing specific to report, but happy to answer questions.
Councilors, anything for Jim? Okay, thank you. Next up on the agenda is time with our city administrator, Ms. Volkers.
Hi, Mayor, City Council. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councilors, anything for Chris? Very good, thank you, Chris. Then the next on the agenda is council presentations. So starting on my right, Councilmember Ingebretson.
Nothing.
Councilmember Olson.
Nothing for me today.
Councilmember Swedberg.
I'd like to be the oddball. Landscape Revival. It's an organization, a committee I've been a part of for over 11 years. We held our event on June 4th at Fire Station 1. So myself, we're all a bunch of volunteers. It's a nonprofit, and it's all regarding native plants and stuff. And we had over 600 people attend this event. It was super. And so with that, we were so pleased with how Fire Chief, allowed us to have it at his facility, and his crew at Fire Station 1, including Fire Chief Assistant Joe Carpenter. He did a wonderful job making us feel so welcome and made sure that we had everything we needed. He kept coming out and making sure. So we were so pleased with everything. We're going to make a donation of $150 for Fire Station 1, and I'm going to give it to Chris so she properly processes. So anyway, just wanted to let everyone know that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I drove by and saw the crowd there.
Yeah.
And, beautiful day and a whole bunch of people were enjoying.
Yep. So thank you. Yeah.
Councilmember Zabel.
Nothing, but Chris, should we just accept that tonight, that donation?
Councilmember Zabel, Mayor, City Council, there are all these procedures and forms, so I'm going to have to put
Yes,
it.
and that's why I said that.
I heard Jim staring at me back here.
Yeah. And that's why I said what I did.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So thank you, yeah.
Nothing for me.
So on mine is a invitation to the community to come to the community picnic coming up Thursday.
Thursday.
So that's from 11 to 1, I
Yep,
believe.
yep, it is.
At Fire Station number 1. Free hot dogs, great food to eat. There's always activities for the kids, and it's just really fun for the community. It's back after a 2-year hiatus, and it's really cool to be able to do it again. So the whole community's invited. And that's all I have. Wrapping up here, we have
Hey,
claims.
Paul,
Oops.
do you want to mention anything about Summerfest? This
Summerfest is here.
This is our last meeting before then, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
Go for
So I'll start, and then you can finish up.
It's
So the
kind of a
Summerfest.
big deal for us.
It is a huge deal, and so Summerfest is coming up on June 24 and 25, Friday and Saturday. The parade is coming on Friday, and going to be better than it has. It's back, and people are really excited. A lot of people are going to be participating in that. So I'm losing track with the other activities that are going on. So if any other counselor wants to fill in on Friday and Saturday.
I'll jump in. So, Friday's the parade and then music in the park.
Yeah.
Saturday.
Oh, that's right.
Yep. Saturday starts off with the OACC breakfast at Guardian Angels. That's new this year. So
Yep.
is it a ticketed thing?
$5 per
But at the door
meal.
or
at the
in
door.
advance?
At the door.
Okay. So come on down to Guardian Angels. They've been very generous to let us use their space. The 5K is going Saturday morning. Whole day of activities in Walton Park.
Yep.
Fireworks Saturday night. I see Susie getting excited down there. Yeah.
Rockin' Hollywood.
Rockin' Hollywoods. Yeah. The Maplewood Oakdale Lions will have their beer garden. So all the staples are back.
That's very good.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else? Okay, let's move on then. So finally, in front of us, we have the summary of claims. This is from May 21st, 2022 through June 10th, 2022. The grand total is $555,172.21. Councilors, as you reviewed, were there any questions that you had about any of the claim numbers? Could I have a motion, please?
Motion to approve claims as presented.
Is a motion, is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And the claims are approved as presented. Thank you. Could I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Then the motion is.
We got to get a second.
You got to get a second.
Can I get a second?
Sure, yep.
Yeah, sure.
There's a second. So there's a motion and a
Second.
second. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? The motion is approved. The meeting's adjourned. Thank you and good night.